Ben Clatterbuck somewhere in Scandinavia. I hope that Vaughn, you're doing great out there. Shoot. Good to
Uh,
see you, Drew.
Nice to see you too, man. Welcome
Yeah.
back for another.
Welcome back, coffee experts. Those of you, welcome back here. Ben Clatterbuck, if you're wondering where he's been, hell if we know. Like, dude just disappears. He just ends up going someplace, goes to some third world, like it's not even third world. He's like first world countries in Europe, just traveling around. Dude disappears for like 2.5 weeks straight. And so just leaves me and Drew here to figure stuff out, I guess.
And he always brings back a good report of the coffee in the local areas that he travels to. So I suppose it's beneficial, Ben.
Research projects. But all I have to say is like I live my life vicarious through Ben Clatterbuck. So if you haven't friended him on Facebook or Insta or one of the socials, Ben just loads you up with pictures and just makes you super jealous at all the radical places he's venturing. So got to check out the adventures of Ben Clatterbuck.
Ben Ventures.
Ben Ventures. Well, we saw Mason last week. It was cool to get to see Mason.
It was nice reunion. I haven't seen him in a while.
Yeah, I think it's always cool to me to talk to people who've been under the belly of multiple different entities. You know what I mean? Like it's one thing to have worked coffee. You know, you and I've talked about this before. It's so funny when you meet coffee owners at trade shows because there's so much like ego and like bravado and like they just like they carry themselves in just such a proud way a lot of times. And I always just want to poke at it and just be like, yeah, bro, I get it. So you're successful. How many of these things have you done? Like, how many businesses have you had? Like, is this your one? So that's the one expression of coffee that you've done. Well, like, not that I'm looking for you to kiss the ring, but let's talk about all the bellies of businesses that we've been under. And I promise you, you're not doing excellent at everything you're doing. So let's just walk with a little humility, all of us together, and realize that we've got something to learn from everybody. And so I think it's so cool talking to Mason because like he was saying, like started with Dutch Bros, worked there for some years, worked there with roasters, worked up from a barista to an assistant to a manager of a large store to a regional manager, experienced the buyout of BlackRock of roasters, migrated into BlackRock as a regional manager. I think that it's cool to me when you can see underbelly of multiple entities and then ask yourself, like, what are they doing well? I think that's been one of the most exciting things for me with us with Coffee de las Mayas is like to see somebody trying something other and then to be able to help them, from a consulting perspective of, hey, you should try this. And what do you think of this? And like, this is what we've seen these people do. And this is what we've seen these people do. And they're just such like a blank palette. And they're like, yeah, dude, let's try it. That's a great idea. And I feel like we've been able to create this really cool thing for them that's so unique because we don't think that we have it nailed. We're all learning and growing. Like, let's learn from other people. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting doing the sales aspect of some of the work that I did. And speaking to, like you mentioned, the entrepreneurs within coffee is there's a lot of competition, at least seemingly competition. And generally speaking, it's frowned upon, and yet competition is what makes us better. Competition is what drives the sales. Competition is what gets customers excited. What is going to get them to come back to me? What is going to get them to, see my stamp card over the Dutch Bros stamp card? Do I have to change my colors? Do I have to change my schemes? Do I need to change my messaging? And even amongst baristas, when I was at Roasters, there was an odd competition between us and, Dutch Bros baristas. And like, we're all friends and intermingled, but I'm sure they thought that their skills were more honed and we thought our skills were more honed. So it carries on into the crew. And as far as De Las Mayas is concerned, it's a brand new thing in that area. So competition is growing. There have been some stores popping up in similar fashion. I won't say the same fashion, but what I'm hoping we can do, and we talked about it a little bit a couple of weeks ago, is stoke the fire of the competition in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Bring people together. Call out the coffee shop down the street and around the corner, and maybe have some sort of event to bring us all together. Let's do a latte art competition. No, you guys haven't done that before. Let's teach you how to do latte art. Let's bring you into our store, show you our machines, and teach you the things that we know so that we can all have some fun together. Because I think there's a lot of opportunity missed in the coffee world.
Yeah,
we don't communicate. If in any industry, if we didn't communicate, how would we get better? If we didn't have same speak, if we're talking about grams, or we're talking about ounces, or we're talking about pumps or scoops, there's the same speak that we want, that we can only get better if we communicate. And at least here in the Tri-Cities, I've talked to a dozen business owners of the coffee shops, and there's more than enough customers. And that's generally what you're going to see in any of the markets. There's more than enough customers for you and your neighboring business. It's just a matter of, how you rein those customers in and bounce them off. And not everybody's going to want to come to you every time for a blended drink, and that's fine. Sometimes they're going to want to get a blended drink down the street. It just means their taste buds are off that day. That's what I was telling myself.
I think that I think bottom line is to realize that you have something special, like lean into that something special, like, and I think alongside of that, realize so does the guy down the street, and
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. Like hone in on what it is you're wanting to do, but also let's learn a little bit from each other, And I think I love pitting the indies against the bigger chains, you know what I mean? And I think that like so band together with who your people are. The franchises have a band, you know what I mean? Like they're under an umbrella. They're blowing the horn of whoever it is. Like they paid to have their sign on the side of their building, you know what I mean? Like so let them cloister together. And then indies, don't be so proud not to think, well, man, could we do something cool with some of the other indies? Like, could I learn from other indies? And I do think that there are some great groups out there. Coffee Fest is doing some cool stuff. Like you see the different groups out there doing, the great events and bringing people together. But I will say that there's something to be said when you can just lock arms. I know we've got really good relationship with the Coffee Republic folks up on Montana. When you can just lock arms with somebody else that's in league with you and learn from each other. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was such a cool experience for you to be able to go up to Montana, help Jonathan and the mayor's family out with their grand opening, especially as they get ready to open up their second one in 2 years. That's a pretty awesome growth trajectory for a brand new company. But for you to get there, and I know we talk about it all the time, but because of the building they built on it, because they used existing foundation, they chose to put their walk in the center, you know what I mean? Which was a much different flow than any stand you and I have opened,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that it created a really cool opportunity for some other workflows that didn't work the ways that you and I are always, oh yeah. I mean, we are just looking at some plans last week with the architect and we're like, no, bro, it goes here, it goes
Yeah.
here, it goes here. That's where that stuff goes because that's what you and I are used to. We've looked at so many different sets of plans. We're like, no, this is the flow that works. But it was so cool to be challenged. Like, I feel like if somebody's shaking you a little bit, right? And I'm like, does it? Does it have to be that way? Or like, could you drop the walk-in in the damn center of the whole footprint of the building and then create a bunch of storage space all around it and create some really cool workflow on easy accessibility to your walk-in and the way that they're doing their cold brew tap right on the outside of the walk-in, like that
Mm-hmm.
they've done some really cool stuff because of where their walk-in is located, things that are so much different than if you and I were to left to ourselves, we never would have come up with in a million years for that to be the layout. What do you think of that?
I think we would have pushed and pulled on that idea for a while. And I mean, it is nice doing the keg tap that they have for their cold brew. It's right out the side, right beside their blender station. Only downfall is sometimes there's a lot of built up pressure, so you're gonna be wearing some of some of that blended drink sometime, which is fun. It's customers laugh, baristas laugh. You're meant to get messy as a barista. I don't think any of my shirts came out unscathed from being a barista. I buy new shirts and they'd have holes in them or coffee stains on them or bleach. So it's all part of the fun. And I did learn also, it's like you said, we get stuck in our mold of what a perfect coffee shop should be. Sometimes more counter space is better, because I would think the way that I was thinking, I'd think less space because less steps equals more. We're going to be more fluent in our flow. We're going to be more efficient behind the bar. We're going to have more time. But in reality, that's not always the same. It's not always going to work that way because at a certain point, if you have a small space, you're at capacity, depending on how many people you have, how many people are in there with you, and how many duties you can have people be doing. You have a small space, you can have each person do 2 to 3 things. If you have a big space, you can have 5 or 6 people doing 2 things, and it's comfortable. And that I learned that from them as well. And I think HB Reno also has that down. They got a lot of space in some of those stands, which is something that I was not used to as well. And the girls, it's the army of girls that work there do a very good job at communicating and keeping things clean. Bigger space, you can keep things cleaner. You can actually reach, all the way underneath the counter to clean back behind the wall, things like that. So stylistic differences, I think things that we learned, of course, along the way. If I was too proud, I would have just forced people to do it my way. And then we're always having the same problems I ran into.
I think I mean, obviously you hear things like more square footage and immediately my mindset goes to, well, you're paying for that square footage, right? Like
Absolutely.
developing your square footage is more cost, like your utilities more on the square footage, right? It's probably going to take more people to run higher square footage. I mean, obviously I always think about a cafe. That's not what Coffee Republic does. So it's not necessarily true, but I will say there's some, there's some great advantages depending on lot size, right? So I would say to anybody that's listening and anybody that's watching, obviously the biggest thing you should be looking for is an A-list lot, right? Like ingress, egress, lots of traffic count, ease of
Mhm.
access, make sure traffic's going the right direction, right? Like easy things that if you've done many coffee shops, you're already thinking like that anyway. And then once you find a lot like that, you may be dictated to on how big the building can be, like
Mhm.
what could it be, you know what I mean? But I think that um, if you have some choices, don't be so stiff and rigid on the way it has to be, because I do think that there's some cool lessons to be learned about workflow that we're always learning, we're always growing.
So what do you think about, Mason's journey was interesting. We were pretty religious about, elevating from within.
Yeah,
And sometimes, I like to say it's easier to teach a barista who knows nothing than it is to teach somebody who has years of experience. So
sure.
as a coffee shop owner, I suppose it could go either way, but what do you think is more beneficial, to have somebody who has years of experience, or to have somebody who's, green behind the ears?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe a mix, right? Maybe a mix of both. I think if I know Jonathan and them started, the whole reason they brought us in was nervousness about going into a whole new demographic with, are we going to find people that know how to do coffee the way that we do it in the Pacific Northwest? Montana's different. Like Montana's on the Rockies. Like Montana doesn't have a lot of drive-throughs there yet. The drive-throughs they do have there are cultured more like cafes than they are like drive-throughs. So it's, the energy's wrong, that the speed is wrong, like the urgency, like speed, service, strength, like the three pillars
Mhm.
that we've been nurtured on since our origin, since our beginning. I think that you don't get that same culture. So I do think it is nice when you can bring in an old hand, which is what Jonathan did for his grand opening. He brought in his buddy that came up, that helped him open those stands in Southern California. They brought in you and David, to help, just from like coming in with the experts elite team, to bring in some experts. But I will say there is a spot where hiring somebody that knows something helps at least somewhere on the team. But I am with you on, if it's the right kind of people, green people are great because they don't have any text, they don't have any context. You're not always fighting against a grain of they've learned it one way, and then you're always working against it. And I know like the kids down in Belize have been so rad because they had zero coffee. Like, man, what a shit show opportunity that grand opening was, where it was like we couldn't even get enough supplies into Belize to be able to train them to batch out drinks the way we're normally used to training people, where we have them make dozens of drinks, like make it, dump it, dump it, make it, dump it, dump it. Like you're just giving people reps. But like products, we were so nervous about getting product down there. It takes a month to get anything down there. And then you don't know if you're gonna have supply chain break, and so it was like they had experience making like a few drinks,
Yeah.
each one of them. And then we're like, hey, let's throw like 8,000 cups at you and see how you do with it this weekend. Like I think that's crazy.
Well, I mean, theory's theory, and I could talk coffee theory all day to them, and they were really receptive, luckily. And I think maybe that helped when they actually had supplies. But yeah, it wasn't 5, maybe 10 drinks each by the time we opened. So, the nurturing process post grand opening was really important too, because while I could be making drinks all day, it's definitely not that beneficial. But you have kids with you who have made a drink or 4 or 5, and
Yeah.
not 1,000. And then of course the value shift, from here to there is like, we're not dumping out those drinks. I'm going to have you practice steaming chocolate 2% and whole milk, and then I'm going to have you dump each one. And after that, they didn't want to dump it; they want to drink each one. So there are little things about repetition and how you teach and how you practice. And I think one thing that we do is kind of like I actually did it in Montana. It was like I'd have everybody repeat over and over and over and over and over and over and over these things. So, what size in a small iced X drink, how many scoops of flavor, in a large blended X drink, how much ice cream base or powder. And that is beneficial to a point until, a month later, I ask them those questions and it's not in there anymore, because it's like a routine, like you memorize an order of things.
Yeah.
So when it comes to practice, I think if all you're working with is theory and then you get your product, you want to work the theory into the product in the same standard rate. So it's like,
Yeah.
if I had them repeat small, medium, large blended drinks, I'm going to have them work on the same process or else they're not gonna remember stuff. So, and that
I
actually
thought you
happened
did.
last time I went down there. It was kind of funny.
I thought you did great though, as far as like establishing standards with them. I think that's one of your geniuses as you come in and you help people develop their menus and develop it. Because I mean, that was a from scratch menu of like and coming up with some really cool names, really cool concepts. Like obviously drinks we've known have worked in other iterations, other places, but still ones that you like made pretty uniquely your own, you know, on purpose and named some pretty interesting things as you did. But I think that what I thought you did really well was the standards of, hey, across the board, this size equals this across the board, like trying to create some standards for specialty drinks, some standards for the classics, just so that they can in their brains at least know, okay, that's how much mix, that's how much pumps, that's how much whatever it is that you're adding, whatever it is that you're basing, like they're pretty metric. It's a pretty metric standard. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's important because two reasons. You know, you're training the baristas to have consistency, and anyone who's been in management who's worth anything in a manager position knows that consistency is one of the most important things in having a solid team. And whether or not that's in your systems or your recipes or whatever it is that you manage, consistency is key. And we'll say that forever and ever and ever and ever. We'll say it consistently because consistency is key. You're also training your customers on what types of drinks they like. If they're getting a small drink and they think it's too sweet, well, every time that they come order it, they can ask for it half sweet. And those are
Right.
little, stylistic approaches that you're going to teach your baristas to train the customers how to order their drinks. And in the end, if you have let's say you have a large iced X and you have a small iced X, they both get 2 scoops of flavor. The small one's going to be a lot sweeter, and you're going to taste the espresso a little bit more. And some customers might comment on that. So in the approach of knowing how these drinks turn out, you want to train your baristas to say, well, just so you know, this gets X amount of flavor, you can ask for it half sweet or with a single shot or things like that. And in the long run, that can, save you a few pennies here and there, but a few pennies here and there really add up.
100%. And I think, and it helps you to pivot, right? Like I know we're in a bind right now in down in Belize on size of drinks, like and what kind of what cup sizes we can get down there. Things you never even would think about here in the States. You know what I'm saying? But like having a hard time on standards of consistently being able to get a certain kind of cup size. So it's challenged us on, okay, so what size is a small, medium, large? You know, like we know what that would be here in the States. Sometimes you have to recalibrate based upon where you're at and what supply chain says. But I think it's really cool when you can create metric standards that if you just back it up one crank, like back it up one click, and then it still is all the same. So you're not like having to reteach all your baristas all new mixtures because you just size down drinks a certain way. But like, how can we make change as easy like calibratable, which isn't even a word, but like, how can we calibrate change so that we can still expect speed out of people? Because you don't want them to get so locked up in their head that they're spending too long making your drinks, and you don't want them to be producing a shitty product, because they're like trying to rush a process to try and remember what the factors are in their brain. So I think creating consistency and creating things that are like metrics to scale, like how do you scale something up or down, and just making that a really easy concept for people, I think is important.
And one thing that happens when you make things too confusing is the baristas don't learn it. And then they don't tell you that they don't learn it because they're ashamed that they didn't learn it. And then they put poor products out the window every time with different flavor ratios and different milk levels and different ice
Right.
levels. And so keeping things consistent and easy allows the barista to remember these things. And not to say baristas can't remember stuff, but when you're teaching them 15 different recipes, it's hard to remember all that stuff, not to mention your product list and the different products within the product list, the different variations, what kind of teas or smoothie mixes or, syrups that you carry. So, all that is ancillary, but teaching them the recipes is important. So if you can systemize the recipe process, it's going to streamline their success in the future and their confidence, because a confident barista is a happy barista. A happy barista makes happy customers.
I mean, there's no way around. Like, I think that making it easy for all of us, right? None of us want things to be tough. Like, make it simple so that they can focus on the things that you want them to be focusing on, which is like making your customers happy, right? Because that's the most important thing. Like, how can you keep them the most happy? Because that's the most important thing, you know?
Yeah. And one of the ways that I think roasters did really well, and I'll speak on roasters probably for the duration of my coffee career and even beyond, was allowing opportunity for outside barista experience to develop within the young people in the stores. And one thing I always say is you get more wealthy when you give wisdom away. It's one of the few things when you give it away, you create wealth, because not only is your team getting stronger, but you're getting stronger, because when you teach something, you're learning the process even better, or you're learning better ways, or you're learning better how to explain. And as we all know, public speaking, teaching, these things are priceless tools. And if you can learn how to do that within and Mason touched on this as well, all of his solid experience within the coffee shop, all the various things that he had to develop and was pressed on, and new skills and unique situations help him to develop into what he's doing today, which is basically talking to anybody and sharing ideas across different understanding levels, and keeping baristas happy. Not everybody wants to be a barista.
Yeah.
It's just a stepping stone for 99% of baristas, and the 1% are probably people who go to open their own coffee shops. So if you can create an avenue within, first of all, get to know your baristas, what makes them tick, because they're not all going to work for, De Las Mayas or roasters forever.
Yeah.
But while they're there, what you can do to help keep them happy is provide opportunities for their natural skills to develop. For example, we have a girl who wants to do accounting. That's very different than making coffee. That's very different than talking to customers all day. The closest thing you do is take cash to being an accountant. And so if there's ways in your process to hand stuff off to these people, like doing payroll, or at least doing some sort of audit system of, if I'm sure you have a tally system, that is something that will make this barista happy. That's something that will make this person feel more fulfilled, because they can go to work every day and think, I'm going to do something that's effective. Because when you do something you want, you feel like you're doing something effective because it matters to you.
Yeah. I think that, there's no way around, like, knowing your people, knowing how they, like how they tick, what makes them tick, and really speaking to that is going to only help you, right? Like, let's figure out how these people work and how we can best meet them where they're at. I think that that's a super brilliant way of doing it. I think too, like, as you're identifying those things, giving them good ways to be trained in those different ways. You know what I mean? I think that I'm going to share my screen, because I don't brag on this enough, I don't feel like, but I think what you helped Coffee de las Mayas create with their membership area for their kids, to be able to give them something where they can come in and they can log into the training center. They can go through your intro video here, where you're going to walk them through what the most, look at that, just like that. Anyways, that's the face right there. And then taking them through each one of the steps, like walking them through a video they can watch over and over again. And then once they've gotten to a point where they feel like they've consumed everything enough, they can click there to take the test, go to the test, go through what the tests are, as they go through, and it asks them questions based upon everything you just gave them. And then in the end, spit out something where it's like, hey, so this is their score. And then right out of the gates, they know either they failed or they passed. And if they didn't pass, they need to take it again. I think that I feel like you did such an amazing job at showing people the consistency of consume a video. Don't just train them once and expect them to nail it, and then send them back to something if you feel like they're not nailing it. Are your people did they not get customer etiquette down? I know you created something else in here as well, not just training center, but also the testing center, where we actually put the flow test in here as well. That's the best picture right there. But as far as like different levels of testing where you can push them through something that as they take the test, exactly where they're at, and you only promote them based upon how they're excelling in it. So I think that super important to not only know what your people want to grow in, but also a standard way that you can train them in that's not going to change based upon, did you just lose your trainer? Did you just lose the main person? Or are you, the owner, now going to have to jump back into training mode and spend hours of taking people through a couple of weeks worth of training process, only to lose some of the people that didn't make the vetting to have to do it again? Like, I really think that was something cool developed by the collab team and largely by you, Drew. So I think that you should get credit for that.
Well, I had a lot of support throughout the years and a lot of good leaders who showed me not only mercy when I failed, but grace also when I failed, and allowed me to but if we didn't have an SOP, they said, well, how do you do it?
Right.
Me to write something that I understood from my perspective as a barista. And then my manager could come in, or the boss could come in and say, okay, well, these are what we expect. These are the performance metrics that we're wanting from you. And how do we match that up with what you think your perspective is in this role? And so I had a lot of, like I said, a lot of great leaders, a lot of good influences. And I know two really important things that you want for people to be successful in your role is clear expectations, and then a clear SOP for how to achieve those results. And numbers don't lie, it's true. But if your numbers are fantastic in your coffee shop, you have a lot of turnover, that turnover is also another number. And so focusing in on what makes baristas tick, because I always say, happy baristas makes happy customers. And I mean, my first manager, Jimmy, Jimmy Bukowski, he gave me
Yeah,
a
shout
book.
out to Jimmy.
Shout out to Jimmy. He gave me a book that I never gave back. I don't know if he was giving it to me or letting me borrow it, but I still it's on my bookshelf back there. It's called Raving Fans, and it's kind of a silly book. I don't know if you've read it or
Yeah,
if anybody listening has read it. It's kind of silly, but that's the point. It's supposed to be funny and supposed to be engaging. It's supposed to be memorable. I think I only read it once, and I still remember it really well. So, a way to showing somebody how to create raving fans, because no matter what you're doing in your life, even if you don't really like your job, being successful at liking it at your job will make you like it even more. Failing at a job you don't like is the worst thing anyways. So having a job that you don't like but doing it well will increase the likelihood of you enjoying it.
I love that. So that's Uncle Drew's word for you today, man. Find a job that you can enjoy and then master it. And then make sure you're in an environment that mastering it's going to be recognized. And if not, recognize there are places out there like that. So don't lose heart. If you're in a system right now and you're like, man, I've just been pining away and this guy doesn't care. I hear a lot of young people get really negative about ascension and growing in a business and not being recognized. I would say realize it's not like that everywhere. You need to try some other places then. Like, don't give up on it. I think that was one of the greatest gifts that Wes Hayden gave to all of you young leaders in Roasters was the ability to try, the ability to go figure it out, the ability to do it on your own. And then that's what's led you to be an amazing business owner now, an amazing like leader of businesses now, and an amazing teacher and trainer. I think that all you guys, Ben and Taryn and all the crew that's come out of Roasters, I think are all just such powerful leaders, and they make the collab team awesome now too. So um, so empower your people, train them up. And those of you who are young people trying to find some place that recognizes that and wants to grow you. It's only going to make everybody better.
Amen to that.
All righty, Jim Moody, another great Coffee Experts Club. We'll see you next week.